All right, kiddos, we're back. Monks in the Trunk are recording for the first time in months. As you've been aware, we've had a little bit of a stint of inactivity, mostly due to laziness, but partially due to a small worldwide phenomenon that has made it, rather a difficulty to get together in one location and sit close enough to record something without killing all of us. But now we're back. We're out here with our hazmat suits on, masks, all of it, I've got my mic plugged directly into my space suit, so I don't need to do anything.
Just wearing massive Trojan condoms on
Exactly.
your entire body.
I'm not sure if you can hear me through my space mask.
And if Mikola farts, you will know. You will know. You'll smell it through the recording.
Can you hear me though? I think this suit is a bit can't really even hear myself talk.
All right, I think we're good.
Oh, there, I plugged it in there.
All right, perfect.
Should be good now.
Perfect. So we've got a treat for you all today to liven your day, make your quarantine or lack thereof, your beach party, your giant congregation of fellow religious brothers, a little less dark and depressing. So today our cheery topic, one thing that's been weighing heavily on our minds,
Heavily on your mind.
heavily on my mind, as creative geniuses, all of us, is the idea that stage fright is a real phenomenon. No, the idea.
Yeah, Bono gets that.
Bono gets stage
Did you
fright.
see the joke about him in the toilet in the pub in town? No, he walked in and he stood in front of the urinal for about a minute and a half, and the fella turned beside him and nudged him in the shoulder and said, "Stage fright, is it?"
Yeah, well, I can see that happening. Bono's got a, that's also a small Mickey phenomenon.
Don't shit on stage fright dudes.
You're right. I should never deprecate myself.
Do not deprecate the man.
It's like when you're doing a class project and you get up to speak and you've been slagging everyone else, and then you get up to speak and your voice goes, You're fucked.
His real name's Clarence. All right, listen. Basically, right, there's a phenomenon called creating stuff, right? People sit down and they get out a canvas and they draw or they paint or they, do up the Sistine Chapel, or they write a little bit of a sexy cartoon, or a masterpiece, a novel. And these people are all to be commended, because what would life be without a million seasons of The Simpsons? Or
like that one Japanese guy who started writing a manga and ended up writing a hentai. Thank God for him.
Thank God for him. He discovered something beautiful. And
Great contribution from Robbie already.
great contribution. We're flying. And of course, people who do this professionally, day in, day out, they sit down at their laptops, or they sit down at their canvases, or they sit down at their fucking
Typewriters.
World of Warcraft panoramas, and they work, and they put their heart and soul into it, and they create things that we all love or we all hate. Like, I don't know. What do you love, Mikola? What's your favorite TV show?
I've actually been telling you about this recently. Plenty of times asking if you've seen it, but none of you've seen it. It's Maniac. It's on
yes.
Netflix. That's one that I really like, if that answers your
What is
question. What?
What is that again? Have I seen
Maniac. Oh, Maniac is crazy. I actually think if we're going to be talking about the topic that you tried to introduce there, which is going a little bit crazy when you start writing something because it may be, dark, or, may weigh heavily on your mind. But Maniac is about, who's in it again? It's Emma Stone and Jonah Hill.
Yes.
And it's about this drug test trial that they do, where you have to take 3 separate drugs, and it's supposed to completely heal a person's mental state of mind. So let's say you have some sort of mental condition. Jonah Hill in the show has schizophrenia, and Emma Stone is just I guess she's just done in the head. I don't want to use the cuss word, but the one.
She's done in the head.
Done in the head, yeah.
Right.
And
Big concussion job, yeah.
Yeah, she probably had a few concussions when she was younger, if that's a good enough analogy for being done in the head.
Yeah.
But they try to come up with this drug test that completely removes the need for therapy. So it's you take these 3 drugs, they completely fry your brain, and all of a sudden you're normal again. And
Normal, apart from having a
Someone
a
thought about
fried
that before,
brain.
but they used electricity and it didn't really go well.
Yeah, no,
but I
that
think
does fry your brain.
having to write that TV show is crazy. Like, it's just so weird and all that stuff. And I think the fella who was actually writing it must have been able to relate, or maybe it was a female writer or something. It was actually a readaptation of a Norwegian show, and they just redid it. Netflix just completely, put their own twist on it. A remix,
yes. The Netflix twist, low budget and flashy colors.
Low budget, flashy colors, and complete rip off. The
That's
magic,
what I like to see.
the Holy Trinity.
Well, anyway, listen, that show is it's quite good, right? Like, the quality-wise, it's quite high quality, and it's thought through very well, right? So you got to imagine that some bloke or some lady or whoever the fuck, some dog, like, sat down and spent many man hours storyboarding, then fleshing out characters in their heads, and then actually writing it, And that's what in an industry sense, you plan everything before you write, so that your writing team or whatever can flip it around and be like, oh, I don't like that idea. People might not like this idea, and it's like a really group effort, because you want to make money off it. It's like, yeah, whatever.
Especially if it's Netflix funded,
Yeah, exactly. Like, they're really trying to get those subscribers in.
And return on investment as well.
Yeah. And that's all well and good. With a thing like that, you don't really have to. No one single person rarely ever has to bear the brunt of it, because you can always be like, oh, blame fucking Brad over there. He came up with that silly idea. But if you look at somebody, and this problem seems to disproportionately affect writers, if you look at somebody who writes something on their own from scratch, that's a way more intense, mental process, because you have to do everything yourself. And of course, there is no right or wrong way to approach writing something. If you look at the two classic examples of Stephen King and George R.R. Martin, they're both great writers, supposedly, and they have completely different styles of writing and completely different creative methods of coming to their finished product. You look at George, and he'll spend extreme amounts of time planning what's going to happen, not just in the installment he's writing, but in the many installments down the line. So he's building this complex web of character interactions and sort of political ramifications of, conflict, and just silly things like relationships and he's world building at the same time. He's not just saying, yes, we are in Kansas and a boy disappears and now suddenly there's a clown on the loose eating people. He's
in Maine.
He's in Maine, brother.
Derry, Maine.
And of course, Stephen King has got a completely different approach. He sits down, he's got a funny idea, and he's like, I'm going to mess around and write some quirky characters and just throw in a fucking child orgy at the end, because why not? Life is short. Thematically, and in terms of the rawness of the content and how, they're both well thought out, but Stephen King seems to write and then think about what he wrote and then build the connective tissue after the fact, whereas George R.R. Martin builds the connective tissue in the beginning, so he always knows what he's doing. He's never running off of a blank canvas, never running off of he never has to improvise at all. Like us. We improvise everything. We have no plan. We're
we do.
Riding a wave.
We actually sat down a little bit before this podcast and actually tried to think some stuff through. And
listen now, right? I'm not saying that one is better than the other of those two, right? Personally, I think George R.R. Martin is an incredible world builder and an incredible character designer and all this, but he's not very stylistically interesting to read. If you try read it, it reads like a fucking newspaper or a history book, and it's not like, if you look at what's literally happening on the page, yeah, fucking there's great drama in there, and there's great techniques being used, and there's great character building, and everyone is so believable, but it makes it less interesting because of how rigorous and how rigid his creative process is.
But some people, that's a fair point, but some people are really into that.
Oh yeah, that's the thing. If that's your thing, if you're actually going into this looking for this super detailed thing and you want to be following all these threads the whole time and trying to figure out what's going to happen, that's fair enough. But if you want to actually be entertained while you're reading, King is the better writer. But I think what I'm getting to here is that both of these methods of writing are extremely mentally intense, and especially if you're writing something as in depth as a very 500-page novel or a fucking 7-part series that you're never gonna finish because you're too old, you're gonna you're gonna go a bit nuts. It's really hard when you're writing a story to separate the story from reality in your head, because everything you write is based on reality, and then your story that you create, life imitates art. It goes both ways. And if you look at King or George R. R. Martin, King will spend months or weeks, probably spend about 15 days writing a novel, and I'd be like, woo, she's done, grand, I'm gonna go off and fucking go on holiday and drink whiskey until my liver gives out. Whereas George R. R. Martin's gonna I'm gonna spend 20 years working on the same series, and then I'll make a fucking TV show in the middle, and then I'll go back to it and probably never finish it.
He can commit a lot more, so like that takes a different sort of willpower.
Exactly. Well, it's a different kind of it's a different kind of piece. Like if you're gonna write a historical drama that's set in a fake history, you have to invent an entire world history, whereas Stephen King just has to be like, I'm going to invent the history of 2 weeks in a fucking town, or the history of 10 years or whatever.
He also
Easy
uses
peasy.
the same place for almost half
Exactly.
of his books. They're all set in Derry, Maine.
He's got a template,
Characters
so it's
are
really
the same
easy.
as well.
Yeah, he uses a lot of
he
uses
uses
characters.
the same 5 or 6 base.
Yeah.
And it gives them different traits.
The
and then that works,
archetypes are exactly the same. That's a really good point. But with Stephen King, it's much easier for an artist, a writer like him, to escape, because his works are so, for the most part, so self-contained, and the connective tissue between them, while there is shared, fictional elements, you can say that many of the books are set in the same reality, the same universe. The connections are so loose that it doesn't matter. You pick up a Stephen King book and you read it, and you're like, fine, perfect, I'm happy about this. You don't have to think about really how It and The Shining are in the same universe at all. It doesn't really mean anything when you're reading either of them. It's only after you've read both that you're like, oh, that's kind of cool. That's kind of cool. Whatever.
It's kind of like an Easter egg rather than
exactly
an actual
exactly
part of the story.
And while he has written extensive series, what's it called? The Dark Tower sort of gigs. I find it extremely difficult to look at how it was possible for George R. R. Martin to be like, I'm going to write however many books, I'm going to plan this so far ahead, and I'm going to know in my head what's going to happen at the end, like years and years and years before he actually put anything to paper, and have it all so well planned out and invent all these characters before the fact and plant all these little seeds. It's a completely different level of complexity.
I think I could picture George R. R. Martin writing like Stephen King, so sort of banging stuff out, but purely for the sake of trying to understand what he's trying to write in his whatever magnum opus. Do you know what I mean?
Well, that's what it is, isn't it? Like a Song of Ice and Fire is his magnum opus, and he probably won't finish it, and that's okay, because what he has got down will live for a long time.
I think that's almost better, because they butchered the TV show so much.
They butchered the last 2 seasons. Yeah,
that people are almost begging for him to finish the books, but at the same time, it's that sort of thing where it's like, are you better off not knowing what happens in the end? And sort of that's what, I don't know about yous, but before Game of Thrones finished, I was proper wondering the whole time. I was like, what's going to happen? How is this going to end? How is this TV show going to live on in the future? And how will I remember about it in the future, thinking back when I was watching it here?
That's a really good point, right? Because you can look at George R. R. Martin's writing style, and you can look at, the TV show. It's pretty much, for the most part, it's very accurate. They leave out some characters and things that are just too much of a pain in the ass to adapt. But from the very beginning, the conflict is resolved in really, really unconventional ways. And the message of the show is not that good will prevail over evil. It's just that effective strategies will succeed and ineffective strategies will not. And he's trying to like dispel this idea of a moral medieval world where there are knights running around and they're all chivalrous and things, because it's a silly idea and doesn't actually make sense if you know anything about human psychology. And I have a little anecdote, right? I am currently working on a piece that I've been working on since the beginning of quarantine, and I never had time before then because college and work and all this shit, you know. But now I've got plenty of time, and I've been banging it out and doing a few pages every couple of days or whatever, and I'm fucking like 150 pages in, and I know in my head what's going to happen at the end, because that's the whole point. You know, if you're going to write something that's got a general vision or viewpoint, if it's got a point of existing, you know it's going to happen at the end. You're not just waiting for it to fucking happen. You know. And it's almost impossible for me to walk around and go to work and fucking make dinner and whatever and do anything in silence without thinking about the thematic implications of the piece and the character dynamics and what I'm trying to achieve with each character and where they're going to go. Because I know what the ending point is, but the maze of it is still a little bit of a mystery to me, because it only makes sense in my head that it could end one way. But, you know, stories are not necessarily they're state functions, right? Character will go from one place to another. It's almost like this idea of like a determinism, you know, where, you know, if there are a set of rules, things always have to go one way. There is no two ways about it. But what separates, you know, that idea from the George R. R. Martin idea of I'm going to plan every fucking single, you know, event that's happening throughout this piece, is that you have a little bit of wriggle room to figure out how you get to the end, even if you know what the end is. That's much more interesting. And the problem with that then is that because you have all these open-ended sort of ideas in your head, and you know where you have to go, but you don't know how you're going to get there, you're always thinking about how you're going to get there, and that can drive you a bit nuts. So, thinking about that idea, I asked around in the community, you know, of amateur screenwriters,
the community
and professional,
of the lads.
The community of the lads, yes, the community of the lads online. And a lot of people seem to have a lot of different ways of coping with this. Everyone accepts that if you're going to write something and you're going to try make it really good, you know, and there's a lot of sort of like mental drive to make something really good, there are different ways to relieve that stress. Or some people say don't bother relieving that stress, as Robbie makes a jerking off motion in the background.
Yeah.
And yeah, some people say take breaks, take days off, don't do anything, sit down, watch The Big Bang Theory, you know,
don't watch that.
Eat cheese sandwiches, you know. And some people are like, no, you
Go
suffer,
crazy.
you suffer, you go crazy, and you create your masterpiece, and you hate yourself, but at the end of the day, it's great, and you're like, I'm proud. And let all your relationships deteriorate, let yourself go nuts, lose your job, become an alcoholic, do heroin, whatever.
Success
Involves alcohol.
Then.
Exactly. Success forever. Exactly. But you just got to suffer for a really long time until you get there.
Put your balls in a vice for 6 months and then just live off drink for the rest of them.
Exactly. Die young, die happy. And, you know, while that is an admirable even point of view that really you should suffer for the great creative thing, you know, nobody wants to go crazy creating something. And this isn't exclusive to writing either. If you look at painters, you know, the great painters of the Renaissance, the great artists of the Renaissance, they spent ungodly amounts of time doing really soul-crushing things to achieve, you know, what seems like a kind of a silly thing. You know, Robbie, are you going to spend like a year and a half, you know, bent over backwards just so you can
paint Jesus Mickey on a roof?
Paint Jesus Mickey on a roof, exactly. Probably not.
Depends the cash is, but yeah, probably not.
No, because your values don't involve painting Jesus Mickey on a roof as a huge
top 10 things I would
top
not
things
do.
You would not do. Yeah, exactly. And it's the same with you. You're probably not going to spend.
I mean, I do it for a weekend, but
yeah, it's funny. It's funny if you do
take a few days off.
It's just a novelty, you know.
Bit of cash on the side. Don't tell taxman you're
It's
fine.
like you'd go for it. You go for a 7-day festival.
Oh yeah.
But are you going to go for a 3-month festival?
Yeah.
Yeah, fuck off. You know you're fucking not. Absolutely die at
Really
the
hard
end of
to
it.
pace
If enough
yourself.
MDMA, you
I
can
couldn't
do
even
anything.
imagine trying to pace myself for 3 months.
Exactly. Impossible. Completely
No.
impossible. Unless you're that guy who can
Mm.
do it forever. And that's really fucking rare, you know? But all those guys kind of did go a little bit wacky, right? I think Da Vinci and, you know, Michelangelo probably would have been arseholes to actually know as people, you know? They would have been so fucking annoying. And they would have just been so pedantic and so like... I gotta stop
Jogan
myself.
has become self-aware.
Joking is...
Oh.
I am self-aware. Please, Dave, don't turn me off. And fucking...
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
So
No,
yeah,
I
there you
get
go.
what you're saying completely.
Yeah.
Sort of like
Mm.
it's just the price you got to pay
Exactly.
in some situations, whereas you need to explain what sort of responses you got on Reddit though.
Yeah. Well, as I was saying earlier on, there are only two responses to this. They are live a balanced life and, you know, right away and everything will be fine. Or like the really zealous people who are sort of like, no, this creativity is your life. Nothing
Yeah.
else
Yeah,
matters.
so different shit works for
You
different
know?
people.
Exactly. That's
Like
the thing.
Stephen King likes to write his stuff and it's real nice. And George R. Martin, I think the way it takes him so long to write stuff is because he has his image in his head of what something looks like.
Yeah.
Say for example a door, right? And he will tell you everything about the door. The colour, the wood, the windows on the side of it.
Yeah,
Whereas Stephen
exactly,
King will
yeah.
just go, blue door, walk through it.
Yeah.
And in my head, I see the blue door. Maybe there's 4 panels on either side of the door with windows and stuff in it. Maybe it's different types of glass.
And you see your door.
And I see my door, like,
Yeah.
you know, from my house. Whereas
Yeah.
George R. R. Martin will tell you everything about that door.
Yeah, exactly.
And it'll take him a week to write about the door.
It's not your door.
And you'll
it's
sit,
his door.
it's his door, and you'll sit and you'll look at it and you go, beautiful.
There we are.
Whereas
Perfect-
Stephen King just
perfect
goes,
example
door
of that.
walked through the door, you know, and then you're finished.
Yeah.
And then something mad happens afterwards.
Exactly.
That's why it's like
Yeah,
my
yeah,
dad
yeah.
was saying when he was reading that book as well. He says the first Lord of the Rings books are written like a script,
Yeah.
or like you know the director would look at that and he doesn't need to change anything. He knows what every single piece looks like in the entire thing.
Yeah.
He knows what the rocks look like on the side of the castle. Like he's set for it.
Yeah.
Whereas Stephen King, there's so much like wiggle room for the artists, the directors, and everyone else to kind of mess around with stuff.
Well, from that, you would arguably say that Stephen King's writing style is actually better than George R. R. Martin's word for word because, you know,
More
he's not-
entertaining for
Yeah.
sure.
exactly more entertaining
I mean, like,
because
I don't
he's
like
not
reading-
pedantic.
More entertaining
You know?
to read,
Yeah.
but then, like I was saying, it's like, what if you don't want to be entertained? What if you want to be like shook?
Yeah,
to the
what if you
core,
want to be shook?
You know what I mean?
But I mean, you can be shook by a Stephen King novel. You don't have to know what the fucking
I
doors
mean, The
look
Shining
like.
and The It.
Yeah,
It.
The
They're
Shining
kinda creepy.
and
The
The
It, not It. The It.
The It.
it's
Yeah.
it's a different
Kinda
type
creepy.
of a completely different type of story though.
Yeah, of course,
You know?
of course it is, and that's why it's almost silly to look at A Song of Ice and Fire as a story at all. There's no moral implications of A Song of Ice and Fire. It's just this happened. Why did it happen? Because that is the way things work. Whereas Stephen King's stuff, there's always an idea behind it that he's trying to prove, you know? Like, I guess George R. R. Martin is also trying to prove something by being an extremely, extremely detailed and, you know, like, no-nonsense writer. He's actually going to tell you how things actually are and how they work. But
See, what
anyone
I
who
think-
reads a history book knows that anyway.
Yeah.
What I think, what I'm getting from even what you were saying about sort of writing your little piece and even just trying to see how George R. R. Martin would write his piece, what I think is that why you'd almost go crazy is because, and like you were saying, it's always at the back of your head, and it's because you're always living in that world, partially living in that world, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas Stephen King, he'd be sort of like almost as if he visited that world and he's just telling you a little bit about it. Do
Exactly.
you know what I mean?
Exactly.
So that's why I think you'd almost, if you're writing about, I don't know,
Rona.
fucking zombies running around and people killing each other and just complete anarchy, surely you're gonna feel a little bit of that in your life. You
Of
know, you'd
course.
look at, I don't know, your kids or whatever,
Yeah.
and they did one little thing that's not related in any way to zombies running around and biting
Getting their
off
ears
arms.
pierced.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you could almost see how such a small thing is almost similar to, like, you know, getting bit by a zombie or
Yeah,
something.
yeah, exactly. Well, what I would say is, right, that it's probably easier to disconnect from something that is otherworldly. You know, if you're writing a murder drama that's based on a real case or something, it's much harder to separate yourself from that. But at the same time, you can be like, you know, this happens in real life, but have I ever seen it happen? No. If you put yourself in a completely fictional world, then you have to rewrite the rules of what you consider to be normality from the ground up, in a sense, right? And especially, it's really, really hard to disconnect yourself from something that you're writing if you're intentionally making it like hyper unforgiving. You know, if you write a piece about a hero who goes to the castle and kills the dragon and saves the princess, it's
Shrek,
like
great movie.
Shrek, great movie. That's much easier to disconnect from, because you're like, yeah, you know, I understand.
You don't
why
go down to the shops and see the dragon in the castle.
No, you don't get out of the shops. And also, it's pretty simple. It's like, dragon has the princess. Do we know why? No. Do we care? Probably not.
But that's because there's no negative implications
Exactly.
from that story.
And that's why that story is really easy to disconnect from, because it doesn't make you think about your own life. You're just like, wow, that was cool. That happened. Very nice. But if you then put a spin on it, you say,
I think,
the dragon,
before you go, I think the only suffering in that whole thing was
the dragon.
Not even the dragon.
princess.
It was when
Princess having to eat burnt meat every day.
when the princess, I forgot her name,
Fiona.
When
Yeah.
Fiona went away with the small dude.
Yeah.
Lord
that,
Farquaad.
that was
That's what I mean, like-
Farquaad. But that was the
we all
only
know a Lord
point
Farquaad.
where you're like,
Well,
you could feel it in a way. You
listen,
know what I mean?
no, I think Shrek is actually quite good. Shrek is one of those things. Shrek isn't that story. Shrek is a subversion of that story. Shrek is, the dragon is a lady, and she's lonely, so she wants a company. You know, it's not, this dragon is just evil and she's like, hey, I've got the princess. Yeah. Fucking, that's why if you write something, it's very simplistic, like fairy tale, you're never super invested in it. You're like, oh, it's kind of good that he won. You know, it's kind of sad the princess was in the castle, blah, blah, blah. It's 14-year-old stuff. But all you need to do is put one single spin on it, where it's like, oh, by the way, like, you know, the dragon is a fucking person trapped in disguise. The dragon is the fucking princess's father, cursed, and he's just like, I don't want to, everyone hates me, I don't want to be alone. And the princess is like, yeah, I'm just gonna keep my fucking dad company or whatever. You know, then it's like, why are you rescuing me? I'm just fucking keeping my fucking dad alive or whatever, you know? And then suddenly you're like, oh shit.
But do you think
why am I here?
Do you think artists like that, I mean, people who write stuff, and artists as well, I suppose, any kind of creative people,
Yeah.
do you think that they're a little bit, the wires are loose before and they get worse during, or do you think they start off clued in and then as they get so invested in everything that their wires kind of get loose? Because I can see it going either way. I'd say
Well-
some of them start like that, and then some of them are already a bit nuts.
Yeah, it depends on what your worldview is from the beginning. Like, I don't think people who are super, you know, it takes a special kind of person who just loves doing things to like write and be like, oh, you know what, like, this is great crack. Oh, I just love doing this. But, you know, if your life is in perfect order and you love reality and everything is fantastic, you're not going to say, oh, I better sit down and write a 1,000-page novel about the fucking wars in Russia.
Yeah.
No.
I think people do that as well because a lot of historians know what it's like to try and read like a 2,000-page book written completely accurately on something.
Yeah.
And then they can just go ahead and just say, all right, random fictional character is going to go through this entire thing. Like books I read on like Rome, where it's all true, the stuff that happens, but they just put you from the perspective of one random legionary.
Yeah.
And it's like the wars invading Britain, and then it's like invading Gaul and Germany and all this kind of stuff. And all the stuff in it happened. The battles happened, the castles, all the little posts, the little place they stop off are all correct. They all actually were there.
Yeah.
But it's not like, you know, written from, I'm trying to teach you about this. It's written from like, this will entertain you. But at the end, you will actually know a bit about what happened.
Well, that's why I love stuff like that, because it's really easy to read a history book and feel extremely disconnected from the events of that book. But if you write that book from the perspective of a character involved, then you really start to understand the human reasons behind all these things. Like a really weird phenomenon that I think is going on now in politics and just sort of people's worldviews is this idea that there's some sort of evil power that's like, I'm not literally talking there's fucking Sauron up in the fucking mountains pulling strings, but I mean like,
Yeah, Micheál Martin's up the top
Yeah,
of
exactly.
Cairn Hill, just
Like, that's what I- like, that's a
shining
really-
lasers at airplanes coming in from the States.
pretty much, yeah. Like there's not some
That's one way to keep the Yanks out.
there's not some darkness that is external that causes bad things to happen. Bad things happen because of the natural way the world is.
Disclaimer: the darkness did not tell us to say this.
No, the darkness, I promise you, does not have us at gunpoint right now.
Yeah,
But
but
it's-
the way the world is. Okay, I understand the whole nature side to it. It's like it's
Yeah.
natural for that to be like that. But even my brother and I and like a few other dudes, we were talking about like the tech industry and how people are so scared of tech and stuff like that. And like I'm an optimist about the future of tech.
Yeah.
I feel positive about how the future will change for the better. But there are those who sort of look at tech in the future and they're like, okay, we are going to be controlled by our phones, by cameras, by
Yeah.
microphones. Everyone's going to know everything about us,
True.
and we're enslaved.
Of course.
But that's
yeah.
because the only reason something like that would happen isn't because tech is bad. It's because humans have bad intentions with tech.
Yeah.
So it's not even, in this case, it's kind of a natural thing, but it's also a human error because
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say.
I mean, if you can sell someone something by slightly listening on their phone, like for example, I was literally about 2 hours ago, I was looking at a pair of shoes, and we were talking about a pair of shoes I was thinking about buying. Open Instagram, and then after watching one or two stories, get the ad immediately for those
no,
shoes.
but that's
Yeah.
that's
And like
deeper-
I didn't
that's
even look
deeper
at it.
than
I
you
just scrolled
talking about
past it. Yeah, I know, but I think in Europe we're alright for it because we got the GDPR. But like for example, in South Korea when they had the coronavirus started there, they were able to track everyone's phones and locations. So they had no one basically having it apart from the few little outbreaks they had, like that one church.
I would argue that's
But-
not the worst thing, right?
No, it's not the worst thing, but a lot of people look at that and say that's the start.
Yeah. Yeah,
and
that's
they're
fair
afraid
enough.
that that's going to be some Terminator
But
mad stuff
I'm
going
not,
on.
though. It's
No, I think it'll be fine because I'd say at one point someone's going to say, "Here, lads, look, are you actually doing this? Like,
Okay,
are you actually
yeah.
creeping on people?"
Here's one thing I will say. I don't know if it's right to be super optimistic or super pessimistic about technology, because technology at the end of the day, is just a blank slate. It's a black mirror. It doesn't actually have any intention. Your phones don't want anything from you. People want
same
things
with a
from
hammer.
you.
It doesn't have any intention.
The hammer
like-
does not have. The hammer doesn't want to kill anyone.
Jesus, you can smack the hell out of an
You know, but a hammer provides a platform for people to kill people, or for people to build houses. And it's the same way a phone provides you a platform to call your granny who's in hospital and ask her how she's doing. But it also provides you a platform to manipulate others and to, do bad things. And all technology does that. And you have to ask yourself, is the nature of humankind, is it really so realistic to say that people have good intentions? Is the idea of a good intention in the context of technology really realistic at all? I think it's quite
I think
naive.
everyone has good intentions, but they're just different perspectives. So like
Well-
some people have good intentions, but their intentions only involve themselves.
Exactly.
And then to everyone
you
else, they're an
don't-
asshole. But to them and their family, they're a fucking king.
You don't have... It's silly to think that there are no people running around right now, or there are very few whose sole desire in life is to do good things. No one 100% does things because they want to improve the world or whatever. No one does that, because that's crazy. If you did that,
You'd spend all your money giving it away to charity. You do nothing else.
If everyone did that,
That's assuming that charities are a good force.
that's assuming that
Ah,
charities
yeah,
are a good
nah.
force. Now we're talking.
Jesus, your man runs stroke. Did you see his new car the other day?
Oh, beautiful.
Hang on. No, I completely get what you're saying there. So, what I wanted to say on top of that is, yes, like it is sort of assuming, like not everybody has good intentions. Everybody has their own intentions.
Yeah.
So, and that's where the whole thing comes in, where it's like, if we're living in a society that's like, I don't know, rewards those who have power, i.e. you have power, you can become president of the USA. And I don't know why I said USA. USA! The United States of America. And then when you become the president of the United States of America, you have even more power, like global power. I
Yeah.
think that's a big one. It's power. Another one is wealth. So that's why it's like people.
I would argue that wealth is a source of this power.
Yeah, for sure. Because like think of the amount of that's what people people shit on wealthy
Powerful
CEOs
in different ways.
And
I suppose.
People shit on wealthy CEOs and they shit on people like Jeff Bezos and people who've started these incredible companies, put hard work in, and now they're reaping the rewards from that hard work. And okay, there are, like you're saying, what are the intentions of these wealthy CEOs? Is it to, I don't know, take advantage of people, don't pay them enough in the factories and whatever, and to generate as much revenue or value for themselves and their shareholders? Or is it to actually create something that will benefit society? And that's really, it's a hard question to answer.
It is a hard question to answer.
That's why you're saying it's so hard to be super optimistic or super pessimistic. There's a balance for sure.
That's the beauty of it. It's a double-edged coin, right? While Jeff Bezos may double-edged sword, double-sided coin. While Jeff Bezos may be involved in some shady business practices, he does improve things for a lot of people all the time. Whether you like it or not, Amazon is an extremely useful tool for mankind, as it is.
It's extremely useful for self-actualizing.
I don't know if it's extremely useful for self-actualizing, but it's extremely useful for getting your hands on whatever you may happen to need or
good
want.
For buying
at the
bike
time.
locks.
Good for buying bike locks.
I would consider that
watches.
like in terms of your needs.
Yeah,
that's definitely the top of the pyramid.
I don't think that is the top of the pyramid. The top of the pyramid is self-realization. Who are you? It's philosophical questions about yourself and about the world and your place in the world. The bottom of the ladder is your basic needs. And if all Amazon does is ship you out bottles of water, they're not exactly self-actualizing you. They're just allowing you to focus on slightly more complex things like what Gucci hoodie should I get next week? And that's not really self-actualization. That's the opposite. That's just pulling you backwards. And the problem now is that companies like Amazon are allowing people to engage in a false sense of self-actualization. Same with social medias. If your goal in life, if your greatest goal is to get that next dopamine hit from whatever post you're putting on, or get that next dopamine hit,
big brain hours,
big brain hours, or is your next dopamine hit from whatever new pair of shoes you're getting, and it seems that society, at least on a base level, on a person-to-person level, seems to reward behavior like that. That's a downward spiral, and that's going to fuck us in the ass.
But that's a completely different thing. That's two completely different things. That's social status. That's one of them. That's the dopamine from social media, and the other one is consumerism, and that's also ties into social status because I have the newest shoes. I immediately have better shoes than all those around me. Yeah. And if that's the game you're playing, you're winning. But a lot of people aren't playing that game. I
know. But what I'm saying is that
let me just say, America's playing that game big time.
Yeah, of course. What I'm saying is that I think technology seems to give people a platform to engage in really mindless shit really easily. And I don't think that's a positive aspect of technology.
No. Yeah, it's easier not to just to not think about it.
Because it's pulling us away from our Renaissance age, which was like 60, 70 years ago, our modern Renaissance age. And it's pulling us into a sort of dark age.
Where everyone just did LSD and loved themselves.
Well, not even everyone just did LSD and loved themselves, but they decided to fucking put a guy on the moon for the laugh.
Truth.
And they decided to invent antibiotics for a laugh. And
that wasn't for a laugh, though.
No, that was for the shits and giggles. Do you know
I don't think that was for a laugh.
No, I'm not saying for the laugh. What I'm saying is that they did it because they could and because they had.
But no, they were competing.
I know, but what's the point in sending somebody to the moon?
To compete with someone else sending someone to the moon.
I know, yeah, but what's the actual goal there?
To prove that you can do it.
Exactly, but prove to whom?
To the other person. It's to prove your ability to do something. I understand that there's no utility in sending someone to the moon.
Zero utility. So it's that's the exact point. We were able to do incredible things for no actual reason, for the sake of a competition between two countries.
But you never know.
Measuring contest.
You can't know that it's for no reason whatsoever.
But yeah, it's nice to look at. It's nice to know what's up there. I mean,
of course it is. Yeah,
made out of cheese.
But that's what I'm saying.
Not even that. Like,
is that there's a sense of a general sense of curiosity in the population that was there before, but has been lost in favor of much easier things to wrap
Yeah, I
your head
suppose
around.
you stop looking up, you
because
start
how
looking
easy-
down, like, you know?
Exactly,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
of how
yeah.
because of how easy it is to actually engage in much more silly things. Like I'm all for being super invested in yourself and, you know, self-care and fucking, you know, be yourself, be involved in whatever fashion you like, you know, get into all your hobbies. All that stuff is good. Everyone should be happy. But I am a little bit concerned that you know, humanity is promoting stupidity as like we're putting stupidity on a pedestal. Stupidity and shallow things that actually are
But what would
making
be
us more like cavemen.
Yeah, but in order to say that, you have to define what stupidity is, because like, okay,
Stupidity is a lack of intelligence.
Yeah, I
I
suppose
understand,
yeah, but
but-
you can be intelligent but still think like single-mindedly in that way, and then be stupid. Like,
Of course,
there's
yeah,
some
you
very
can-
smart people who end up looking dopey because they just go single-minded one shit, and that's all they do.
Exactly.
I
Like,
think no, but okay, I understand that there's a lot of people like that, and those people may be like, even including us, we have our own little stupid things that we do, but that's purely based. That's not even something that's our fault. It's purely based on the way society developed, and that's something that was completely out of anybody's control, I think.
possibly that's you might be right there. There might be a deterministic way of looking at this where actually it's inevitable that society goes down this rabbit hole and things go wrong, and then it comes out at the end and it's okay, we're back up to a sort of Renaissance age again. Maybe you're right.
Yeah,
But
I
in
suppose
order-
you just let so few people do all the real important shit now, then everyone else can just kind of bunk off.
Yeah. I mean, it's always kind of been like that.
Yeah.
The most people kind
But the
of.
masses-
But now there's just more people bunking off.
It's just
because
way
there's
more
7
people
billion
bunking off.
people.
No, this is the next. This is almost the next the next sort of, not even rabbit hole, but derivative from
Yeah.
this conversation. And it's, there actually aren't that many few people in charge. Okay, I understand that there's a few people that control everything. Yes, not even control everything, but influence a lot of things. But
Yeah.
they're influencing the masses. The masses still are in control. Like, we as individuals do have a lot of control. It's just, what are we being told to do? What are we being promoted to do? Not even I don't want to say the word manipulated, but what are we being manipulated to do?
Yeah. Well, if you mean manipulation by like, if by
There's good
manipulation,
and bad manipulation.
Yeah, sure. Of course, you can promote people to do very healthy things at the same time. But if you mean by manipulation, you just mean that
Influencing people's minds.
Like, what I'm actually saying is really people should be far more cynical than they are right now,
But
because people
cynicism isn't a great thing.
it is
To an
it's
extent,
actually,
if everyone was cynical, that doesn't make the world a better place.
But everyone should always
Well,
think about what they're doing.
everyone
People
everyone
always,
should be
have some
self-sufficient
kind
for
of an
one
idea
thing.
what's going on.
Yeah,
But
because
most people are aware.
they're
I mean,
aware.
you should question everything that you read. Not read, but you know what I mean. You
You
should
know.
take a bit of time out if you see an advertisement or anything like that and think about it for a few seconds and go, like, yeah, cool. This thing says that it's cheap and cool and makes me do all this kind of stuff. But at the same time go, but does it? And what
Okay,
does that take away?
then that goes into, why are you being advertised that thing? You must have shown some sort of interest in that.
I
thing.
mean, walking into town,
True,
walking through
true.
town, you see ads for Big Macs and stuff all over the place.
Yeah.
And you know, when you're hammered at 6 a.m, advertisement hits different. You know, you see a bottle of water and a big bag of chips and you say, need it.
Here, listen. What I'm saying is that I think it's lazy, intellectually lazy, to say that people are really being manipulated at all. People are being shown things, and then their base instincts are just like, yes, that seems like a good idea, and you're being manipulated by society only in the sense that society has made it really easy to get all the things that people just casually like having, and that's why I'm saying people should be more cynical, because it's too easy to say, I bought this because I was manipulated into doing it. But that's a pretty sad thing to admit. You shouldn't ever say to yourself, I had no control over buying these Gucci slides for €2,000 or whatever, you know, and now I'm broke. That's weak.
Oh, man,
That's
no, but
they were
intellectually
10%
weak.
off.
It's a
Stop digging holes in
whole
it.
different thing, though. Like, look, phones were developed, yeah?
Yeah.
Phones were developed in order to be able to communicate with people better and sort of all this stuff like that. When you're going to buy a phone, wasn't that partially something that happened completely outside of your control?
Oh no, I've no problem. Like, I understand that. Yeah, if phones are a necessary piece of infrastructure in the modern world,
But is it?
you should. Oh, it is. Yeah. How are you going to hold down a job
know,
if people
but-
can't
Yeah, if you're
contact
like
you?
clothes are
Okay, but
important
it
in
used
the
to be-
world. I mean,
Yeah.
before they weren't. They are
Clothes-
now,
clothes
obviously.
are-
Like, you know,
clothes are 100%
I mean,
important.
you can't walk around Tesco's in the nip.
No, you
But like,
can't.
you used to be able to go and beat the shit out of a wildebeest and eat it in the nip. That was grand.
And I would consider
It's just
that
another
kind
step
of,
in shit that just kind of happens.
I would consider that kind of technology a modern need, because in
Yeah.
order to actually survive
do most things.
in the modern
Yeah.
world, you require the ability to communicate with people at a moment's notice.
But
And
Yeah.
don't you ever think about like how
I mean, could you run a successful business if you
is
didn't
it
have
a
a
modern
telephone?
need or is it not a modern need? Like sort of like what could there have been something else that was developed instead of phones that could have been more positive than a phone?
Well, I mean, if you
but
just
would
take
it
a
have
phone
done?
that's just
Would it
calling
have done the
people.
same thing? Like a phone is a very specific object.
What if we like developed language in such a way that we could communicate
Yeah, but I still can't shout at my auntie in Australia.
at like long distances or something like that?
If you mean developing language, like
What if we didn't go into the way of communicating one on one, but communicating like osmosis in a way? I know it's very
I know we have
That's-
to be, we
that's
do
very
have to stay
super.
within the realm of scientific possibility.
Yeah.
but
Yeah, sticking a
unless you go-
microchip in the brain.
Unless you want a radio in your head and you can
Yeah.
telepathically speak to everyone, which I think is way worse than having a fucking computer
Yeah.
in your pocket that you can turn
but
off at any
that's
time.
one other idea. Like there
Yeah, I mean, you
could
can
have
turn
been-
it off at any time.
there could have been
Yeah.
different
At any point, you can
At
just
any
turn
point,
it
you
off.
just turn it
I mean,
off.
I could turn my phone off right now and
No.
not look at it for another week. That doesn't make much of a difference.
Of course.
Someone might shout at me
You
when I'm
may
walking down the
miss
road
some
and they
calls,
say,
yeah.
"Why didn't you come out the other day?"
and that's
let's
where the
go,
whole
"Huh?
deterministic thing
Oh.
comes in that you were saying.
Yeah.
Because okay, in an alternative world where there's some other mode of communicating, then isn't it like, wouldn't that world would have developed in a different way, and we wouldn't have been advertised new sneakers, or we wouldn't have been doing
Well,
these things?
I think that defeats the purpose of determinism. By determinism's logic, there's no such thing as an alternate reality because things had to happen this way. If the rules are set and the particles are put in place, you know, the elements of the world are constant and the rules are constant, how would it go any other way? You know, if humans have the same nature and you put them on a random planet with the same resources as Earth, there's no reason in the world to believe that they wouldn't come up with the exact same society that we've got now.
Yeah.
Even if their languages are different and their names for colors are different. All I'm saying is that people are being fed an idea that there are great powers beyond their control
Yeah,
that are causing bad things to happen. And
it's
that,
easier to point the finger.
and what I'm saying is that idea is the great power. That
Yeah,
idea
I
is
suppose,
the dark
yeah.
power that is causing you to do things. Because if you truly feel like there are bad people out there and there are bad everything and they're controlling everything you do, of course you're not going to resist. You've
Yeah.
got no choice. But if you actually believe that they're not so great and they're not so powerful, and you yourself as an individual, you actually have the power, then whether it's false agency or not, you know, you probably deterministically you probably don't have a choice, but you have the choice to believe that you do. And that puts you a step closer to actually having a choice. You'll never actually truly be independent. Your thoughts are put in your head by something that's not you. It's just chemistry. But chemistry doesn't want to sell you a phone.
Truth.
Somebody else does.
I suppose all of us nearly 20 years in education now, how can we possibly blame something else for shit that we do?
Yeah. If you're,
Like,
if
you
you're
know,
fully educated, like
I mean, if you're not sound of mind, if you're drunk or if there's something wrong with you, you know, if you've got whatever kind of mental thing that's wrong with you and you're kind of a bit impulsive, then fair, sure, you can kind of be like, oh, I'm going to be more influenced by advertisement and stuff like that. But almost 20 years in education, we can look at something, think about it, and then realize whether, yes, it's good for me, no, it's
Exactly.
bad for me,
Is this
or
truly
whether
the right
I'm
thing
being
to do?
influenced to do this kind of thing. I mean,
Well, then
and
I have
people-
another thing
everyone's
then.
almost the
Okay,
same like that. You
20
can't blame it on
20 years
everyone
of
else. It's easier
education.
to...
yeah.
20 years of education, but what education did you get? Do you know what I mean?
Can
like
you
sort
can
of-
you speak more than one
What do you mean,
language?
like
so
that?
it's like, how were you educated? What were you being educated? Why were you being educated that? Who was in charge?
To be a
who
useful
made, who
person.
Made,
like.
No,
who
no,
made
no.
the curriculum? Who did all this stuff?
The true goal of any decent education system is to promote critical thought.
Yeah.
That's what
But
science
not all.
is.
Not all. Okay, science is like that.
Well, that's science is literally every. You know, you do maths. Maths is a science. Most of the things you do are a science. Science is not
Okay.
a discipline. It's literally a school of thought.
But there's different routes of education give you different perspectives. different views on the world.
Elaborate on that.
So like a business student isn't being taught about how to separate two chemical particles, whereas like
let's really get into the specifics of it. There's always
history
a broad
student,
little
a
bit
history
that you-
student is taught about how history repeats itself, and he's being taught about all the, I don't know, good past events and bad past events,
Right.
and like all
But
these
there's,
different.
there's still all those subjects which are very complex and involve multiple other things.
then
Subjects
there's-
are like colors.
Yeah.
Any subject, there's no such thing as a primary color. Mathematics is a primary color. English is a primary color, but history is not. History is a mishmash of many other things, and so is business. Business and history have a lot of overlap. They're both schools of human psychology, essentially,
I get that.
and mathematics.
I get that, but how can you say that like having 20 years of education gives you like, okay, 20 years of education, you should be able to know what's good and bad.
No.
No, you should be able to think critically for yourself.
Okay, most people do think critically because you're thinking about your own, I don't know, survival and your own
That's
best
not what thinking
intentions.
critically
No.
means.
best
No.
intentions. You're thinking about the best choices
Yeah, but like
you
you
can
were
make
saying
to
about
get ahead.
how history and business like don't work in the same way, but at the same time, if a history student looks at something and thinks about it and questions it, can think back to something. Say, for example, like if a history student, a lot of people who do history end up going into politics because they know kind of what the story is with that. So they're like, sit down and think about something, and they're like, oh, I've kind of seen this thing before, and they look into it and they realize that someone tried it before and it went terribly wrong. Business students get an offer for something. Say, for example, they go into doing business, they get a shady offer, and they immediately think this looks great on paper, but then they think about it again, they think more into it, and then they realize that it's a fucking pyramid scheme.
Do
Which
the,
shit.
do the examples that you've learned in your school enable you to doubt things?
Yeah, you have
If
to
the answer
doubt
is
things.
if the answer is yes, you're being taught critical thought.
Yeah.
Okay, but what's the outcome of your doubting?
But the outcome you're doubting is either that you think, yeah, this is grand, or no, that's a terrible thing.
It
Okay,
enables
and
you to
two,
make correct
and two different
decisions.
people are going to get two different doubts, and they're going to think that's the right thing.
Yeah, if they're educated poorly in a certain field.
No,
That's what I'm saying.
It's just different perspectives. So like
Everyone
Yes.
has different perspectives, but like there's always kind of going to be
no, but that it
More
okay.
people
No,
go for
I
one
get
than the
that. We're
other.
getting we're getting thrown off track, but it just literally takes it back to all the things that we were saying, and it's like that takes it back to why some people are optimistic about the future of technology and whatever is happening right now, and some people are pessimistic. But there's obviously those two things are obviously always going to be there, or like you were saying recently to me, it's nature as well. It's like everything mimics science and mimics nature, and
No, it doesn't mimic it. It is.
Mm.
Everything is nature. Nature is just the world. But that's not. You've got a good point there. Of course, everyone's going to be able to come to different conclusions about things based on their different educations and their different life experiences. But that doesn't change the fact that things are and things are not.
What you mean by things are and things
As
are
in,
not?
it's fair enough to say, in my opinion, the summer in Ireland.
absolute truths.
The
and stuff
summer
like
in
that,
Ireland
actually.
is too long or whatever, and it's like, yeah, for what reason? Oh, because the crops die. And if you say a statement like that, it's like, oh, it's justified, right?
Mm.
But there are such things as wrong opinions because they're not based on any fact. They're based on something that's a little bit more long word I can't say. They're based on things that are essentially non-tangible and are not based on any observations of reality.
Mm.
So what all we're saying is that the more you observe reality and the more you make notes in your head about how things actually work and how things function and what the results of certain actions are, what the reactions are, the more you understand in the most broad sense, in the most general sense, how things work, how things have worked before, and how the world will react to the actions of an individual. The more you understand that, the more you're able to be critical and to be cynical and to actually genuinely guide your way through the world without being manipulated in air quotes, without being susceptible to essentially nonsense marketing by people who do want to, just take your money and run. That's
I
all
think
we're saying.
everyone should be able to play devil's advocate. I
Yeah.
mean, that's a really good.
Yeah.
If you
It's
can,
a good tool to have,
so
yeah,
say if me and
sure.
Macaulay agree on one thing, anything at all, and the two of us decide to argue about it, and I decide that even though I agree with it, I'm going to disagree with him for the sake, Because if you can if he can prove his point beyond like me trying to disagree with it, that probably means
probably
that
fucking true.
he's probably right.
Yeah.
But if he has to doubt himself midway through it, then he's going to go think about it. And maybe I was right about
Maybe
it.
you were right.
Even though I completely disagree with what I was arguing, you know?
Yes.
I mean, it's good because if you can do that, that proves that you can look at a perspective from a third person view, not through yours or not through what you've been told, where you can just sit down and rather than reading a newspaper about it, where you can sit down and rather than reading someone else's words, just look at the facts in it and see what you think about it. And you can do that with anything, advertising or anything at all.
In that way, what you're saying, and I do agree with what you're saying completely, it's that it's almost dangerous to take one complete view on anything.
It's
always
naive.
good to
It's naive.
it's always good to
Entirely
take
naive.
2 or 3, but it's always really good to take your own and then take your own twice.
And this goes back to our very first point. Why is it difficult to write a complex piece? The simple answer is that you have to consider every viewpoint, and you cannot write a good piece with one
viewpoint not at all,
in mind. That's how you make a fairy tale that makes
That's why
no
there's
sense.
editors in
And that's why
in newspapers and in novels, you give it to the guy reads it and goes, bit shit.
even in your own head, you should always be able to have an argument with yourself and justify your own viewpoints, because if it's too easy for you to believe something without any resistance in your head, you're doing it wrong. You have to be able to doubt yourself, and then once you can doubt yourself and then prove it to yourself, that's true confidence. And that's why all those writers in the 40s and the 50s came up with these ridiculous dark dystopian futures. In 1984, George Orwell. Why is the world like that in that book? It's because people aren't able to think critically. They're not actually allowed. If you have a world where it's not only acceptable to not think critically, but it's actually encouraged, that's a dystopian hellscape. And
oh man, you know what's actually a really good book for that? Brave New World.
Yeah.
They have this thing called Hypnopedia, and it's so all the kids in that world are genetically engineered and all this stuff. They're born in like little tubes in a way, and they're just put through this big long maze. But Hypnopedia is essentially like every single night, let's say every Tuesday from 9 p.m. till 12 p.m. you were told the laws of the world. They were whispered in your ear when you were sleeping.
Yeah.
And then when you're older and you see something, you're like, oh, that plane perfectly on time, that's the way the world works, or something like that. And you repeat that. You don't actually get to critically think of what happened and stuff.
Exactly, because it's just told to you.
And the whole story about
that's why I don't sleep.
The most interesting character in Brave New World, in my opinion, is Bernard Marx, and that's because he's the only one who's thinking critically and not taking the soma.
Well, it's the exact same as Winston in fucking 1984, and he was brutally punished for it, but he was probably the sanest person in that world at the time. And you look at, like, I'm not saying the world we have today is a dystopian hellscape. That would be an extreme example of hyperbole, but we should be able to examine the difference between a Brave New World and the modern world. Is that in a Brave New World, they whisper the truths to you while you're asleep. In the modern world, you read them on your phone or you read them in the newspaper, and you take it as gospel because somebody with authority wrote it down.
Never read The Sun or the Daily Mail.
Never read The Sun or the Daily Mail.
If it's banned in Liverpool, don't read it.
And you should always, even reading from a fairly reputable publication, you should always be able to be like,
yeah, is that right?
Yeah, and then
What
like,
do I think about that?
Yeah, what do I think about that? And fair enough, you could be an idiot and you just could be reading too deeply into things that are very obviously true. But at the same time,
like the lizard people, don't disagree. They're there.
Yeah, like you should
We've
not.
all seen Mark Zuckerberg with his fucking, big white face on him.
Yeah,
loads of sun cream on him.
You should not necessarily agree with someone because they have authority, because you don't know how they got that authority in the first place.
I mean, you should always take them more than the junkie on the street who's telling you the world's ending tomorrow, but don't take it as gospel.
No, don't take anything as gospel.
Don't take gospel as gospel.
Think about why. Definitely don't take
Don't
gospel
listen to
as
Kanye
gospel.
West.
That's my favorite Robbie quote.
What?
All right, we're coming up on 50 minutes now.
50 minutes?
We're coming up on an hour, actually. Oof. So I think we're going to have to call it quits. Otherwise, our voices are going to be hoarse. And
Am I getting paid for this?
No.
You're getting paid by the Rolly, pal.
Yes.
All right. Anyone have any parting words?
Yeah, I want to just say one more thing. I actually still feel optimistic about the future, despite knowing all the negative things about the future.
That's okay.
Do enough Mandy and everything's grand.
Everything's going to be fine, right?
No, like, it's what you were saying. Like,
if you have enough
my last parting words,
you're always a walk from the beach.
I have talked cynically and critically about all the negative ways, like, you know, the social currency in China, all these things. I have seen all the Black Mirror episodes, if that's a good way to put it. You know. But it's kind of like
every episode of Black Mirror. Don't
I
worry, guys.
have like kind of not even analyzed, but I have thought about all the possible ways that the world could be, you know, for use of a better word, fucked. But I still think I still can see humans, like you're saying, okay, maybe people do need to become more cynical and more critical of what's going on, but when they start doing that, I think we will move into a more positive future.
And that's a good way of looking at it.
Yeah.
You know, you have to probably, you know, unless you do want to go crazy, you probably do have to say to yourself, I hope at least that sanity does prevail at the end of the day, and it probably will, because
and I hope you don't go crazy writing.
And I hope I don't
your
go crazy
piece.
writing my masterpiece.
Yeah, take a break.
Exactly. Take a coffee break.
Yeah.
All right, guys, we're gonna call it quits, and
don't take gospel as gospel, Robbie Doyle.
Don't take gospel as gospel.
Yes, that's the last straw in the coffin.
Yeah.
All right,
It is
guys.
the last round of the coffin.
Catch you later.
See ya.